The Kievan Rus is like the worst empire that's ever been, empiring. Of all the empires, the Kievan Rus of the 900s, 1000s, 1100s can lick my balls. Fuck the Kievan fucking Rus. The Kievan Rus are a bunch of Swedish Vikings, anyways, and they conquered a bunch of Slavic people. A bunch of Slavic people, a bunch of Kriviches, and a bunch of, Veps and Drevlians and, Tavarians and Tvertsi and whatnot. So you have the Kievan Rus. It only lasted for 400 years. So the Byzantine Empire lasted for 1,000 years. It was right next door to the Byzantine Empire. If it wasn't for the Byzantine Empire, the Kievan Rus wouldn't have been shit. The whole point of the Kievan Rus actually getting any fucking tribute or money or, any kind of success was because they were, a byproduct. They lived right next to the Byzantine Empire. They had not only did they have the location when it comes to business, the key to business is location, location, location. So Kiev is perfectly situated on the Dnieper River, just north of the Black Sea, so they could trade with the world, go to Constantinople. That trades with the entire world. So how the fuck anybody who was running Kiev at the time, if you didn't succeed in trade and doing well with running the damn thing, you couldn't fucking succeed with anything. So if Kiev isn't doing well, the leadership is basically stopping, a moving train. Kiev will do good, do well by itself. After the Mongol invasion of 1240, the Russian princes were obliged to seek a patent from the Mongol Khan in order to rule as Grand Prince. So they needed a patent. They were paying taxes to the Mongolians, and they needed to have a patent to, hey, give you $1 million. Give me $1 million, I'll let you be king of that land over there, okay? We rule over everything, but that little piece of land over there, give me $1 million, I'll let you run that land. They all fought for the Mongolians for that patent. There was rivalry for the patent. There was rivalry for the leadership in Vladimir City. Developed among the princely houses, particularly those of Tver and Moscow. Gradually, the princes of Moscow became dominant, forming Muscovite Principality, which they ruled until their male line died out 1598. So first, the Kievan Rus are kissing fucking Constantinople's ass. Yeah, they attacked them a couple times, but then they signed fucking agreements, and then they became their little proxy, sitting there getting tribute from all these other, goddamn tribes and shit. So you have the Kievan Rus is sitting there kissing Constantinople's ass and the Byzantine Empire's, little bitch, and then they're going to be the Mongolians' fucking bitch. They're going to kiss the Mongolian ass. That's the Kievan Rus. The Kievan Rus is not, some grand. They want to say it was the golden era of the fucking Rus, maybe, but that's pretty pathetic. They had a state that seems to be, it wasn't democratic, it wasn't fair. They were able to build a palace or two, but that's, Ivan the Terrible was able to build fucking St. Basil's Cathedral. Basil? Is that Basil? Is that the same Basil that killed St. Michael the Third, the Constantine? Anyways. So the Kievan Rus were a tumultuous regime after tumultuous regime. They're just old style, kings and queens. My military is bigger than yours. Might is right. So you got a bunch of, warring tribal warlords. And then you have the secession wars, once the king dies, and then apparently it went to the brothers and not to the sons, and that just confused everybody. So they would just, whenever one of them would die, then it would just descend into chaos. And then once the Mongolians conquered them, then they just couldn't keep the shit together. The first Russian, the death of Yaroslav the Wise in 1054 AD, broke it up into 3 different parts. 3 men are going to tear, the first Russian state apart after the death of Yaroslav the Wise. So we're going to say the Mongolians conquered them, but really the Kievan Rus were conquering themselves a long, time before the Mongolians even got there. The Rurk dynasty lasted for 700 years, but the Kievan Rus only lasted for 400 years. The Byzantine Empire lasted for 1,000 years. The Rurk dynasty underwent a major schism after the death of Yaroslav the Wise. The Kievan Rus were only a thing because of the Byzantine Empire. The sons of Yaroslav the Wise is Yaslav and Sviatoslav and Vsevolod. A line of Polotsk princes assimilated themselves with the princes of Lithuania In the 10th century, the Council of Lübeck made some amendments to the succession rule, divided Ruthenia into several autonomous principalities that had equal rights to obtain the Kiev throne. It's called the Keevan Rus to differentiate it from the other Rus that's out there. The Novgorod Rus, the Ladoga Rus, the Swedish Viking Rus. The Rurik dynasty was going to last until the times of the Troubles. Ivan the Terrible. That's what the Rurik dynasty brought us, Ivan the fucking Terrible. So it's actually probably good that that dynasty goes away. Never comes back. The brand spanking new Romanov dynasty comes in. The Bolsheviks are going to kill all the Romanovs. But if you learn the Romanov dynasty, you learn the Rurik dynasty. That's the majority of your Russian history right there. Kiev was taken over by Oleg in 887. No, 882. And he killed Askold and Dur. And who the hell were they? Were they Swedish Vikings or were they, the Slavs? Were they Polans? Were they the Drevlians? But when Rurik took Novgorod over in 862, that's the traditional start date of Russian history. So this should be actually easy for Americans to understand because we got Native Americans here, the Shawnee, Cherokee, Utes, Apaches, Comanches. So that's just like the all the Slavs, the Slovenian, the Slovenes, the Croatians, the Viaches, the Polans, the Eastern Slavs, all those Eastern Slavic tribes, the Drevlians, the Radomichis, the Tyvertses, the Libys, the Croatians, Marias, the Kriviches, the Chuds. Not all these, but, a selection of those. But anyway, Slovenes, Dragoviches, Radomiches, the Viatiches, the Viatichis. The Viatichis actually were democratic. They believed in self-government. The Viaches. So these would be the Native Americans. So you have all these Native American tribes, the Kriviches and the, Viaches and the Radomiches, right? Native Americans were very decentralized too. I don't know if you could say they were democratic, but they were decentralized. Not much hierarchy. A chief, but the chief was usually run by a council of elders, and a lot of time it was a female. There was women that were part of the leadership too. So in America, you got the Native Americans, and then you got the English conquerors, and then they call themselves American. But before that, you had Spanish, and you had the French, and you had the Swedes, and the Dutch. You had all these imperialist conquerors. You had all the Portuguese. You had all these other European empire nations, imperialist nations that were trying to establish themselves. So if you have, not Mexico. If Mexico came back and said, hey, give us our land back, that would have some justification. But imagine if Spain came back and said, hey, why don't you give us our land back? Why? Well, we used to run New Mexico. Spain. If Spain, because they used to run New Mexico a long fucking time ago, then they think that they get to come back and say that they run New Mexico now. Think about the French. So, would it be, is it better? It's not good for me, I know that, but is it better for the world if the French was running shit over here? Or if the Swedes or the Dutch were running shit? Maybe, maybe not, but I know it's not a justification that, hey, I used to run you, a long time ago. I get to continue to. That's like Frederick Douglass's, owner or master or whatever. Him coming, hey, remember, I used to own you. No, for 20 years, I still own you for the rest of your life. No, you don't, motherfucker. You're lucky you got to own me for the first fucking part, you fucking piece of shit. Jesus goddamn Christ. So that would make no sense if the French or the Swedes or the Dutch came over here and tried to conquer parts of America over, saying that they had, conquered the Native Americans or whatever a long fucking time ago. And then their conquerors, so, they got the Native Americans, which is the Slavs. You have these Slavic tribes. And then you're going to have these conquerors, the people that call themselves the Rus, are these Swedish Vikings. And they really, really don't want to call them, Swedish Vikings. They don't want to say that they came from Sweden because they want to pretend that, everything came from the Slavs, which, I could understand that. The 5 original Russian towns are Beluzero, Murom, Novgorod, Polotsk, Rostov, and Ladoga. So these are the Varangians. The Varangians are your ancient Russians, the ancient Rus. the ancient Rus. And so these, Rusties, these ancient rusty Russians, these rusty Russians are the Varyags, the Gotlanders. They're Swedish, Norwegian, Danish Vikings. They're Norsemen. They're believers in Thor and Samhain, which, is whatever, but they're conquerors. They're outside oppressors. They're foreign conquerors taking over the Slavs, taking over the Ukraine, taking over Kiev, taking over, Novgorod and Ladoga too. There was an uprising in Novgorod. You had that one hero that tried to stand up. Forget the guy's name, Ahab or something, or Ahim. But the Novgorod, the Slovenes had stood up. To me, it seems like the Russians are mostly Muscovites and the Ukrainians are mostly Cossacks. Novgorod, Ladoga, Moscow, they're closer to each other than to Kiev or Lviv or Mariupol or Odessa. So these Novgorodians, these Ladogans, these Muscovites. Moscow's the Muscovites. Novgorod are the Muscovites. So when you had Rurik, he established himself in Novgorod. He established himself in the north. And then when you had Oleg, he came down to the south. So he, basically doubled his fucking regime. But he was taking over, land that wasn't his to begin with, just like Rurik took over land that wasn't his to begin with, too. They're going to say Petersburg is founded by Tsar Peter the Great on May 22nd, 1703, on the site of a captured Swedish fortress. So they're stealing Swedish shit, right? So they are the Swedes that now, fast forward a couple hundred years, they're stealing Swedish shit. Moscow, if they're not stealing, God, how are they going to build cities? If the Russians weren't stealing cities, how are they going to establish any cities whatsoever? Moscow, you'll see how they'll rebuild Mariupol. They're not good at building. They're good at destroying. Moscow defeated Novgorod, Ivan the Terrible. He defeated Novgorod. This is the fucking ancient fatherland. The ancient Russian fatherlands is Novgorod. And Ivan the Terrible, he killed his own fucking son. And then he massacred the fuck out of Novgorod and just kept massacring them nonstop. He wouldn't fucking stop. That's what the Muscovites do to their own ancient Russian fatherlands. The Muscovites don't have no respect for anybody. They're killing their own ancient Rus fatherlands with the Ivan the Terrible, massacre. It's called the Massacre of Novgorod. Look it up. So the Novgorod, people are defeated. A lot of them are killed and dead. All the buildings are destroyed. Novgorod, eventually they're going to say they joined with the state of Moscow. So they became Muscovites after a bloody crusade organized by Ivan the Terrible. Who the fuck is Ivan the Terrible? He's part of the Rurik dynasty. The Rurik, they established themselves in Novgorod. So why the fuck is he sitting there killing the shit out of Novgorod? The Rurik dynasty dies soon after with Ivan the Terrible's rule, which, good. That makes sense. Jesus Christ, that was not a direction that people really want to go. Apparently, you had 4 of the Slavic tribes that begged for Rurik to rule over them. In 862, Ladoga and Novgorod, the Chuds, the Slavs, the Veps, and the Kravitians. But they actually repelled them to begin with, and then they said that they asked for them to come back. Yeah, right. The Varangians, the Varyags, the Rus, Rurik, Igor, Oleg, Olga, Vladimir, Swedish Viking motherfuckers. The 4 ancient native Ukrainian tribes are the Gravetians, the Scythians, the Skalati, and the Cimmerians. That's like BC, but the ancient native Ukrainian tribes, these are the tribes the Swedish Vikings would have known or killed or oppressed, stole money from, for taxes. The Drevlians, the Buzhans, the Volhynians, the Tavarians, the Polans, the Tivertsi, the Uliches, the Bulgars. They were in Ukraine too, and so were the white Croats. The Tivertsi are a tribe of an early East Slavic tribe. They lived in the lands near the Dniester and probably the lower Danube. So the Keevan Rus is absolute fucking garbage. They're absolute fucking crap. Their whole hereditary succession. Well, my father was king, so I get to run fucking shit. Fuck you, motherfucker. You need to be elected, and you need to convince us why the hell you're, even worthy of being elected, motherfucker. Sitting there just, well, my daddy ran things, so, it's probably just best for everybody if I just keep running things. He ran things, I ran things. It's just, I want power. I don't want you to have power. So, okay, the Shawnee, the Cherokee, the Utes, the Apaches, the Comanches were here first, but the Spanish, they were trying to conquer them and kill, natives and steal their land too. The French, the Dutch, the Swedes, and the Spanish. So, Jesus, Muhammad, Christ on a cracker, what does that make us now? What does that make us now? The rise of the House of Romanov happened when Anastasia Zakharyna married Ivan IV. Ivan the Terrible. Anastasia is going to be the first Tsaritsa, the first Tsarista of Russia, the first lady, I guess you could say. The Tsarette, 1547, married Ivan IV. He loved her, but 13 later, he's going to get killed. She's going to get killed. He's going to blame the court, and this turned fucking awful. So I wonder if Anastasia had lived, if Ivan the Terrible wouldn't have been so goddamn terrible. But that's the rise of the Romanov. Anastasia as the Romanov, she had the child that eventually became the Romanovs that the Bolsheviks killed. They used to be called the Yakovlevs, but this is another